A whole new world came out last year for just about every platform, but the developers recently hit me up with a review code for their Switch port of the game. A Whole New World is a retro throwback very much like Shovel Knight was to the NES era of games. Jump into this world as you use a plethora of different potions to save your home. It's a game that will have you tightly gripping your controller the whole way through. A Whole New World takes place in between worlds that make up Versi. Versi was created by the goddess Yakshini when she decided to split it into two separate worlds, one of good and one of evil. Knowing that the evil forces would want to use the goddess's powers after she was gone, she decided to split up her remaining power into 5 emeralds, scattering them between the two different worlds. That brings us over to the present, where Lord Baddock, the leader of the strongest evil faction, finds an orb of darkness that reconnects the two worlds. With the two worlds reconnected, holes bridging both of the worlds start to appear, and now it's up to you, the Potion Master, to save the day. Using your collection of potions, you travel between the two different worlds, defeating bosses and collecting their emeralds. Ultimately, you're on a journey to get strong enough to take on the Lord himself. It's a pretty straightforward story that plays more in parts of the gameplay. This is a game about challenge, very much like the NES era, but it does use the backdrop story in the gameplay in a clever way. A Whole New World adopts a lot of the qualities that classic NES games were known for. Everything from the art style, platforming, down to the incredibly difficult gameplay. The layout of the game is an action platformer as you platform your way towards the end of each stage boss. In between the start of the level and the boss varies greatly between each level. At the beginning of the game, levels are pretty straightforward. You get some basic enemies in your way, platforms, and pitfalls. Not everything is as it seems though. Falling into a pitfall doesn't guarantee your death, instead it teleports you over to another world. It's almost like an inverse of the main world, though not entirely. While some platforms and level design will just be mirrored images in the other world, secret items and characters are hidden away at times, so it's always best to explore both of the worlds if you're a completionist. In the early start of the game, you're mainly equipped with a single potion that acts as a projectile. It's a handy tool that can shoot straight up, straight down, and forward, but only in an arch. It gets you by for the early start of the game, but your collection of potions starts to open up as you progress through the game. When you start to defeat the bosses at the end of every stage, they give you one of the emeralds, which unlocks one of the goddess's powers. Each of these emeralds unlock a new type of potion or power for you to use. For example, there's one potion that shoots a ray of lightning right out of it, perfect for hitting faraway enemies or multiple enemies at once. It's not just the powers that get to branch off though, the level design gets pretty elaborate and it almost happens abruptly after level 2. The early half of the game will sort of tease the idea of being able to swap between the two different worlds, but the remaining 75% really just hammers it down on the player. One level, for example, adopts a Metroidvania type design that has you travel to 4 different corners of the stage, taking pieces of the boss. Ultimately, this leads up to a final battle with the boss for the emerald. It's an extremely challenging and brutal level that throws enemies left and right at you, all while messing with your sense of gravity because you're constantly switching between the two different worlds. The creativity and design was clever, but also equally challenging. The whole Metroidvania level style and the hell theme world was fantastic, but the area that had you going through labyrinth-like rooms with enemies that just sort of shot out at every corner felt a bit chaotic and frustrating too. It's not to say that I didn't like that the level was hard, but rather that at times it felt unfair rather than just challenging. For the most part though, I enjoyed the gameplay and the varying level design. The same goes for the bosses that each felt unique from each other, though I wish they'd make you use up your new potions. I found that some of the later bosses could still be taken out by just using the first potion you received rather than having to use the most recent one you had. I also wish that the game was a bit longer as I didn't expect to beat it in a matter of hours during my first playthrough. With that said, you are encouraged to go back and replay the game in the unlockable New Game Plus mode that gives you new endings. For anyone else looking for more of a challenge in the game, there's also a boss rush mode for the 7 bosses and a challenge mode, plenty to keep you on your toes. On the other hand, if you're not the type of player that seeks challenge and just wants to play the game, you can get through it in a few hours in a single playthrough, and that might be a con for you. In regards to visuals, A Whole New World looks very much like a retro game that was made with current technology. The art throughout the game is well done in retro pixel design that mimics the look of a lot of 8-bit games from the NES era. However, you can quickly tell that this is a modern game with a great use of animated backgrounds and the abundance of projectiles and enemies on display. It meshes together well to feel retro yet modern at the same time. Even when you're outside of the gameplay and just seeing the static image cutscenes or the main menu of the game, it feels like home. It feels like those classic days of playing in front of a CRT. Playing both on a regular sized TV and on the Switch's smaller display, things look sharp and vibrant. It's not all perfect though. I noticed a few bugs while playing on the Switch version. I noticed that the game would have a bit of a slowdown and would often skip frames but only for a few seconds. There was also one bug where I entered the boss's room but the camera didn't really align with the scene, so I couldn't really see the floor of the stage. These weren't game-breaking bugs by any means, the slowdown never affected the gameplay since it was only a second or two after respawning, and the glitch with the bug never happened again. A Whole New World has a charming soundtrack that shines along with the visuals on screen. Despite all the chaotic visual mess that happens when the game gets challenging, the music was pleasant and delightful. It surely helped keep me in a good mood during those moments of frustration at times. The sound effects were equally as great, they didn't sound like they were just ripped out of a sound bank or anything, instead they were unique and felt perfect in place. Ironically, some of my favorite sound effects came from the options menu of the game where I went to tinker around with some of the music. With all that said, I do wish that the HC rumble on the Switch was used. Having played my review copy of the game on Switch, the absence of any sort of vibration feedback when getting hit or just fighting a boss was definitely noticeable. A Whole New World is a retro throwback to the NES era of games that were filled with charm and challenge. This game tries to take bits and pieces of that era to form a new modern take on the retro genre, and it does so beautifully most of the time. Occasionally the challenge can dip into the area of frustration, but it remained enjoyable throughout the playthrough. There were a few bugs in my gameplay session, but none that ruined the experience or became an obstacle for me. My main disappointment with the game was just how short it was. You can clear out the 5 main worlds of this game rather quickly if you have the skill. It's a game you can beat entirely in a single sitting. However, there's plenty of replay value for those of you that seek challenge with the boss rush, challenge, and new game plus modes. Even though its main attraction is a short playthrough, for the current $10 price tag, I think A Whole New World is worth checking out, especially if you were a fan of the recent retro efforts of the Shovel Knight series. That does it for my review of A Whole New World for the Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. If you have any questions about the game or future review requests, please leave them in the comments down below. You can also reach me over on Twitter, Instagram, or my Discord, which are all linked in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.